starting chapter 6 in You Can Change the World, the Christopher Approach by James Keller. Labor management. Tremendous issues at stake. A short time ago, in a large Midwestern city, I had occasion to visit a friend of mine, a vice president of a well-known manufacturing concern. He is a fine chap, what most people would refer to as a nice guy, civic-minded, and a person anyone would be glad to know. However, in talking with him about the labor management situation in general, and the part of the individual workman in that situation in particular, he showed that he had a blind spot where his role in the business world was concerned. A blind spot, incidentally, which you or I could easily have possessed had we been in his position, taken up as he was with the problem of running a very complicated industrial concern. A long and costly strike had just recently been settled with his employees, and this executive, a ruddy-faced, extremely energetic man with a mind like the proverbial steel trap, when it came to analytical figures and the industrial problems, was anything but a cold, hard businessman. When I saw him pacing back and forth in his office for the better part of 20 minutes, he kept exploding about the ingratitude of people who were never satisfied with getting just treatment and fair wages. They always want more, he almost shouted. Give them an inch, and they'll take a yard. Give them decent working conditions, paid vacations, health benefits, everything. And what happens? They go on strike because they say we're unfair to labor. I don't get it. It beats me. I asked him if he really wanted to know the cause of much of his company's trouble. A sudden stop in his pacing and an incredulous, "Now, don't tell me you know," was his only answer. So, with this doubtful encouragement, I plunged in. Granting that you've done all you say you have, I told him, you've still overlooked one very important item. You haven't given your employees yourself. At that, the roof almost fell in. Given them myself? Are you crazy? What do you want me to do? Go around the plant and play nursemaid to men who wouldn't appreciate it even if I were stupid enough to try it? You missed the point, was my reply. You don't have to be a nursemaid to anybody, but you do have to be a human being where your workmen are concerned. To you, your employees are just so many cogs in a wheel. You don't really know them, and they don't know you. Don't fool yourself. People resent not being treated as individuals. There's dignity in every human being, and every human being likes to be treated as one. If you and your associates got out and made it your business to take a sincere, friendly interest in those who work for you, and I do mean a sincere interest, because people have a sort of sixth sense about things like that. They can tell what is genuine and what isn't. I guarantee relations between you and them would be a whole lot better. Friendly interest, huh? The reply was almost blasted my eardrums. That's so much twaddle. This is a business we're running, not a Sunday school. He was still muttering, almost sorrowfully, under his breath, about people who weren't businessmen, sticking to the things they knew something about. When we left his office that Saturday afternoon and got into his car to drive out of the plant, as we reached the main gate, a company policeman started to wave us through when this vice president suddenly stopped the car and stuck his hand out of the side window. "Afternoon, Jim," he told the cop with a curt smile. "Have a good weekend." The look on the Gateman's face was a picture no artist could have painted. From a sort of surly politeness. His expression changed to one of incredulous surprise, as much as to say, "What goes on here? He's never done this before." Then quickly he managed a grin and a "Thanks a lot, Mr. Same to you." When we were safely out of earshot, this executive turned to me with the air of a man who has made a startling discovery. "Darned if it didn't work," was his amazed comment, and you could almost see the little wheels in his brain telling him, this is good business. Friendliness really pays off. To him, his discovery was encouraging, and in a limited sense, it was to me too. Yet withal, it only scratched the surface of what was the cause of his and of most human troubles. If his friendliness had sprung out of a genuine love of his fellow men, of that Gateman, and of all his other employees, it would have furnished a solid beginning in eliminating the friction between management and labor. It would have paved the way toward better social justice on both sides, fair wages and fair work, decent working conditions for employees, a decent respect for the rights of employers. This human recognition of the rights and duties of both capital and labor will prove, totalitarian propaganda notwithstanding, that the evils that afflict our human society are not necessarily inherent in our American economic system. The solution is not to overturn our civilization as communism would do, to take away property rights so man will no longer cheat or steal, to legalize the evil of class warfare and class hatred in order to arrive at the goal of a classless society. Well, that's not the goal of the people doing it nowadays, right? It's to increase the wealth and power of that top group, and keep the people of the lower classes from, confronting them, right? The solution lies in the daily application of divine law promulgated by Christ of Galilee. Jesus said that he came not to do away with a jot or a tittle of the law, but to refurbish it, And this application will reform not only our morals, but our institutions as well. Every man is created in the image and likeness of God, as in God puts his ideas forth, and, that's that's creation, and then creation can make their decisions that way. And in that, we are our brother's keepers. We are what we would have others be to us. A well-known automobile industrialist, Henry Ford, is one of an increasing number of management executives who are putting this ideal into everyday practice. In talks given by young Mr. Ford all over the country, in the past 2 years, he has stressed just one idea: industry would make a much greater contribution to humanity if it put as much time and thought into the human relations of its employees as it does into machines, buildings, and technological progress. In a recent talk in Washington, D.C., he reproached his own company in the following words: "It now seems clear that we have not kept the development of our human relations in industry in pace with the development of our production technology. Perhaps for every dollar we spent in scientific research for the development of better products and more efficient machines, we should have spent another dollar in research into the problem of people in industry." When ordinary folk all over the land read this in their daily papers, they sat up and took notice. This was something they had seldom heard before. It was an encouraging recognition of a very old idea that each and every man counts as a human being, as a child of God. Well, not the same thing. But the Bible has a metaphor, right? That kind of proves that it's not a literal thing, but I've gone over that elsewhere. And even more graphic illustration of how the man in the street received this news, and more particularly the motivation which prompted its issuance, is expressed in the words of one Ford Company employee. Asked what he thought of young Mr. Ford, this worker replied, "Henry, he's okay, he's a right guy." "What do you say that?" someone insisted. "He says hello to you," came back the prompt answer. "But what's so wonderful about that?" his questioner asked. "He's the only big shot who ever said hello to me when he passed me in the corridor. Most of them don't even give you a tumble." So people do want to have others take an interest in them. They don't want to be patronized. Sure, a man or a woman has to earn a living and wants to be decently paid, but he and she want more than money. They want to be treated in such a way as to be able to maintain the independent dignity, which is their right, which is just another way of saying they want to be loved, and they, in turn, do want to be their brother's keepers, the rights and duties of labor. On one hand, workers with a Christopher purpose should strive to carry out honestly and well all equitable agreements freely made without violence, disorder, or outrage upon employers. They should accept just wages and not agitate for an immoderately higher rate of pay, which might imperil the economic soundness of a concern and bring about hardships for both employer and workers. The Christopher-minded employers, on the other hand, should treat workmen as free people and as co-partners in ownership, profits, and management, and thus avoid extremes of both the left and the right. Those not possessed of considerable wealth, in short, the workers, are more defenseless against poverty and injustice than employers. Hence, an employer should, to quote Pope Leo XIII's great encyclical Rerum Novarum, never tax his work people beyond their strength, nor employ them in work unsuited to their sex or age. His great and principal obligation is to give to everyone that which is just. Thus, because management is in a more advantageous position, it has a greater obligation. In every country where it has failed to guard the security of the worker, it has prepared the way for its own destruction. There is, however, a double danger to be avoided, as another encyclical, Quadragesimo Anno, issued by Pope Pius XI, pointed out. On the one hand, to quote the encyclical, if the social and public aspect of ownership be denied or minimized, the logical consequence is individualism, as it is called. On the other hand, the rejection or diminution of its private and individual character necessarily leads to some form of collectivism. To disregard these dangers would be to rush headlong into the quicksands of modernism with its moral, juridical, and social order, which we condemned in the encyclical letter issued at the beginning of our pontificate. As remedies for the economic evils of the day, Leo proposed a return to the social and moral principles of Christianity and advocated limited intervention by the government as the guardian of public welfare and prosperity. Within the framework of justice, workers were to be fairly paid, decently fed, clothed, and housed. Harmful child labor was to be stopped. Workers' health protected. Justice assured in negotiations and contracts. Finally, Leo concluded in his encyclical, which has come to be recognized by people of all faiths as a Christian manifesto on labor, the state must remove causes of industrial conflict and control outbreaks of strife.